everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. I am this week's host. My name is Brian Vitale. Joining me, I have Adam Vitale
Hello, we're shorthanded today.
and James Galizio.
Hey, folks.
So it is the three of us holding down the fort here today. Of course, this is my first time back in a few weeks. I've returned just from my trip that I was doing for my day job. So thank you to he's not here, but thank you to Josh and of course all the rest of the crew for keeping everything going while I wasn't here to record. So Josh is not here this week because he is up at PAX West covering all sorts of information there for us. Some of the information there is for announced games that have maybe already filtered into the news post. Some of it will come out over the next couple weeks or so. But Josh is for this month, our boots on the ground, making sure that we get all the coverage there in person, including some really neat interview opportunities. So that's kind of cool. So we'll catch up with Josh either next week or the week after for all the things he's seeing up in Seattle this week.
Yeah, there's a lot of indie stuff, but there's also like he played the Like a Dragon Gaiden game. He played a demo for Persona 3 Reload. I believe there was a demo for Star Ocean 2 Remake. So there's some interesting things up there, some interesting opportunities if you're in Seattle.
And then Chow is just helping a friend with an obligation that he was doing this Saturday. So maybe we'll have the full crew next week. Maybe we won't. We'll see as we roll on into September. So September, as we all know, is a very packed month, especially for RPG fans. I think on our Twitter account, if you're still able to follow it, Adam just recently put out the September release list. And it's quite long. So this month has a little bit of something for everyone. And that's, people are still like, I haven't finished Baldur's Gate yet. Some people are still jumping into not quite under our coverage window, but Armored Core literally just came out. So we all have a lot on our plate right now. But we're going to go into this podcast talking about 3 new releases. Starting out with probably the obvious one, then going into some smaller titles here. And then outside of that, there's really no major theme this week in terms of like news announcements or coverages. We just have kind of a smattering of new announcements, nothing world shaking, but some new announcements for some upcoming games coming out next year. And then we have a bunch of trailers. A lot of these are like story related trailers for games that are coming out later in September or October. And then a few release windows at the very end. No real theme to any of it. So we'll just kind of bin them by type of news and go on from there. To start out this podcast, we are going to start out with the obvious thing here, and that is, of course, the release of Starfield. So Starfield, for those that have the regular edition of the game, we're recording this podcast on September 2nd. It comes out on, I believe, the 6th. However, the embargo did lift a couple days ago. Those that got the premium special edition are able to access it early. And Alex Donaldson wrote our Starfield review for us up on rpgsite.net. So go ahead and do give that a read once you've listened to this podcast. Alex couldn't join us this week. He had a family obligation. He might be able to join us next week, but he's hard to wrangle. So no guarantee on that. But James was also able to get some early access to Starfield. So, James, from a distance, I saw you and Alex talking in the back about, your thoughts on the game, some coverage ideas. You obviously covered a pretty interesting find that you put up on the site as kind of like advice to players going into Starfield. But just talk about your experience with the game in general. I don't know if this is a game that you're really excited for, or if you played a lot of other Bethesda games, or if you're more excited about the space exploration theme of this game. Just go ahead and take us away with your thoughts on Starfield.
So here's the thing. I probably wasn't... Well, no, I have Game Pass, so I was probably going to play it anyways, because why not? But I've never really been a Bethesda fan. Like, I've played a bit of Morrowind. I played maybe a dozen hours of Fallout 3 when I had a 360 back in the day. But I've never really been a big fan of, Bethesda games. So essentially, Starfield was the first Bethesda game I've really sunk some serious time into. And looking at my playtime now, at least the Xbox app says that I've put somewhere close to 100 hours. Let's see, what's it say? Yeah, 4 days, 7 hours, and 14 minutes. So
that seems about right.
Yeah. So yeah, as someone that hasn't played a Bethesda game before, I guess on one hand I went into this without any real expectations because I just didn't know what to expect. Like again, like I've played a little bit of Fallout 3, I've played a bit of New Vegas, so that's an Obsidian game. But overall, just went in, and I guess I could see it for what it was or whatnot. Um,
So what do you think is the game's like biggest strength, I guess? Like what's the best part about it?
the side quests, and from what I can understand, that's like been a consistent theme with Bethesda games is that the side quests are the best part of it. There is some good aspects of the main quest too. There's a few specific little set piece events that are interesting. There's one for a main story quest called Entangled. It's pretty late in the game. It's like one of the last ones you'll do, and that has a really, really neat gimmick that I think a lot of people are going to end up enjoying quite a bit. But the side quests, whether it comes down to the UC Vanguard quest that deals with this like xenomorph type thing called a terrormorph. There's the Freestar Rangers quest that deals with like a like a sort of conspiracy type deal. There's the Ryujin Industries, like actual like espionage and like whatnot themed side quests, and a lot of it. The interesting thing is it's not just like a lot of times in like an open world RPG like this you'll like side quests will be mostly just the narrative and it doesn't really do too much interesting in the world itself, but some of these actually do take good advantage of the gameplay systems that Starfield has. For example, Ryujin Industries, like the whole deal with it is that they want you to basically sabotage competing like companies, and the way you do that is you like they'll give you something and they'll be like, hey, so find a way to get this on their computer without getting caught in or out and stuff like that.
And I
But
assume there's various outcomes depending on how you achieve this or not.
yeah, yeah.
So tee
And
us up here. So I was actually just behind the scenes stuff. I was originally slated to review this game, but couldn't because of my day job work trip. So I ended up kind of having shuffling a little bit of the responsibilities around. So I've played not a lot of Bethesda games, but I played Fallout 3, Fallout 4. I've played Skyrim, put about like 150 hours into that. So in those games, you kind of start out with some sort of you're in a disadvantaged position as someone who effectively is like a nobody. You don't go into the game with any sort of history. And I know Fallout 4 actually is the only one where it actually kind of gives your character a family. And it's like that was even just a little bit of setup for who your character was. Some people thought was kind of
that
too
was sort of
much.
controversial back in the day. Maybe still
Yeah, they're
is.
like, I don't like, yeah, like I can't role play if I know I'm looking for my kids or whatever or my dead spouse. I forget exactly the setup of the game. So in Starfield, does it set up like your character in any way in terms of like their history, or is it truly blank slate?
It
Um,
is
Go
it
ahead.
is mostly a blank slate, and you can actually choose different backgrounds and traits that really help to like role play what sort of background your character has. The only thing that is going to be the same for everyone playing this game is that you start off doing a gig in a mining operation on a planet called Vectera. That is the only thing that's going to be the same for everyone. But like your background beyond that is something that you set up.
So is that like just picked out of a list in terms of like I'm spacer or I'm merchant or something like that. I know some of this might have been covered in the pre-release material, but I don't remember offhand.
Well, I assume the background thing is kind of like, Mass Effect had it. Um, Baldur's Gate sort of
Oh yeah,
has
it
it,
did.
where it's just
I did see
it
someone like
affects a few dialogue choices, and perhaps for certain quests you might have certain options available to you depending on your background. Is my assumption.
Yeah, yeah, you will. And sometimes it can be interesting. For example, completing the Freestar Rangers quest line will give you the attribute like Freestar Ranger. and there's been a few instances where I've been able to use dialogue options related to that has helped me in certain situations. And same thing with the UC Vanguard, same thing with the Erugian Industry. So it's like as you're going through these major side quest chains, and you can tell when a side quest chain is major because it has a unique icon. Because like normally you kind of have like a blue like checkbox that lets you know this is a side quest, and then there's like a green triangle if it's like a smaller like activity type thing. And but if it's a larger like side story with let's say like a dozen or so like objectives, then it's going to have a unique icon to go along with it.
So
Kinda neat.
I haven't played this game. I bought it. I bought the expensive edition so I could play it early, and that's not happening just because of time, of course. But I see some criticisms about like planets being barren, and there's 1,000 of them. Like, what is that actually? Like, I don't have any context other than people are like, there's 1,000 planets and there's nothing on any of them, and like that seems extreme.
Well, here's the thing. There's like 1,000 planets, but much like in real life, only a certain amount of them are like habitable. So,
Do you have a Mass Effect like planet scanning game for the ones that aren't?
uh, well, you can still like go onto an inhospitable planet and see, hey, what sort of resources can I mine here? I can set up an outpost and still try to like, even if there's like no flora or fauna on a planet because it doesn't have any oxygen or anything like that, there still might be a reason to visit it. But yeah, a lot of planets, like even the populated planets, even the ones with a lot to do, there's specific points of interest that you can explore. But obviously, since a planet is huge and there's a lot of thing like and whatnot, most areas on every single planet is going to be essentially completely barren. Like you can go in, like if there is like plants and animals on a planet, you can go in, you can like check each biome, and there's like specific like plants and animals for each biome that you can find. There's like different features you can find with a scanner, you can like mine and all that. But the majority of the game isn't going to necessarily be like, well, I think one of the problems that a lot of folks are going to run into with Starfield is that they've probably have a specific idea about what type of game it is, and it's not really a planetary exploration game. Like you can land on planets and look around, but even like No Man's Sky is probably going to have more interesting like generated environments with different like attributes for each planet. This is much more about like Starfield's universe and star map is more of a backdrop for the usual Bethesda flair. And some people are going to be disappointed by that. Some people, myself, actually the fact that it is a bit more focused and like all of the extra planets out there are just like the equivalent of like radiant quests is something I'm actually happier with just because it means that I can
I mean, I
like
haven't heard that
kind of
term in a while. Radiant Quest, another Bethesda. That was one of the big marketing things for Skyrim, which I think completely fell flat. But one of those things you just end up ignoring, or at least I did. Maybe someone out there really found them enjoyable. And I when so yeah, Starfield. I'm really glad we get the chance to speak to you and hopefully Alex next week about what it actually is, because kind of wading through the response to the game as the embargo lifted has been a bit tricky. There's certain people who have played a lot of Bethesda games, but are hoping this game would feel more different than it does. For some people, it fits like a glove, and they're saying this is, clearly Bethesda's formula, but polished, relatively speaking, to the best extent that they've accomplished yet. Some people, I think, I saw one person disparagingly compare Starfield as like this is more like Mass Effect and not like No Man's Sky. I'm like, well, Mass Effect was pretty rad, so I'm okay with that.
yeah.
Um, but and I remember thinking like even The Outer Worlds, which was like this double A Obsidian indie kind of Bethesda-like game. I also saw people compare to Mass Effect, and that game I thought did have a format that I really enjoyed. I just didn't like the writing quite as much in that. So I don't know. It's one of those things where I think a lot of the disappointment might stem from the way the game was marketed as like the, build your spaceship, there's 1,000 planets. It's like, oh wow, that's like No Man's Sky. Only it's not really quite like No Man's Sky. Um, but does that mean that the quality of the game is less or more? No, it just means like misaligned expectations. So in terms of like, I won't say the story because, as you've mentioned, some of the side objectives or the side quests are more compelling and more interesting than the main quest. But just in general, like the writing, dialogue, interfacing with NPCs, like are you spending like hours at a time not talking to anyone? Is there a lot of dialogue? Just how does that feel going throughout the game?
Um, so there is like in specific spots in Starfield, there is like obviously cities. Like they showed off some like Aquila, New Atlantis, Neon. There's some other smaller like settlements like Hopetown, Paradiso, stuff like that. There obviously is going to be a lot of like people you talk to, a lot of side quests you pick up, and dialogue you have in those specific locations. And then obviously there's Constellation, which is your group of friends. And from basically the word go, you have like half a dozen, maybe a bit more than half a dozen, like companions that you can just swap in and out or add to your ship crew or whatever you want to do because they're just there from the get go. And it's like, it's very interesting because it's like, again, I haven't played Skyrim or too much of it, but it's like at the beginning of a normal Bethesda game, you're kind of on your own, whereas that's not the case in Starfield, which is really weird when you think about the fact that this is the spacefaring exploration focused Bethesda game where you would think the whole like, oh, just you and the unknown would be like a big idea with it. But no, you have Constellation, which is just this. There's a lodge, there's like a bunch of different rooms for people. There's just you just walk in and there's like a bunch of NPCs, all with like names and whatnot that you can talk to from the word go, and it's kind of interesting because I wasn't looking at the marketing for this, so I wasn't expecting to just be kind of like surrounded by these different characters so early on.
And I guess that one, expectations, I don't know if anyone could have been planned expecting one thing or another because, at least to my memory, Fallout games having the companions is a pretty normal part. You get two companions. I believe for Fallout 3, one of them had to be the dog. You'd have dog meat and then one of their companions. And then in Fallout 4, you could actually have two human companions. I might be getting that mixed up. But in Skyrim, I know eventually you can get one companion, but if I remember right, it's like late in the game, they're like a person that you hire. It's been so long, so I hope someone who has played Skyrim more recently is not like, oh, he doesn't even know what game he's talking about. But you do eventually get one. But I still think when I think of my time with Skyrim, it was like 90% by myself. And when I think of my time with Fallouts 3 and 4, it's almost 100% of the time with companions. So kind of Bethesda's kind of gone both ways on that. So yeah, the fact that you have the companion crew really early on in Starfield does, at least just hearing it described that way, make me think of, oh yeah, I guess that is like Mass Effect in a way, of course, with the crew there and the party members there. So how does the gameplay feel? Are you mostly playing in first person, or are you playing in the Bethesda jank third person view?
Funnily enough, their third person view this time around at least is not super jank.
Oh, that's pretty.
It's actually a pretty decent way of playing the game. Generally, what I've been doing is whenever I'm not in combat, I'm third person, and then when I am in combat, I switch to first person.
That's
Uh,
good. Yeah, I don't want to be too disparaging, but yeah, I just have always just defaulted to playing those games in first person, so much so where I'm just like I sometimes even forget there's a third person option. But then when what game was it where oh yeah, it was Cyberpunk. Um where they announced back in 2019 or so that it was going to be a first person RPG. And so many people were like, "Man, I have absolutely no interest," because they get sick playing in first person, or they get more immersed playing in third person.
what's the
So
point designing your characters so much if you can't actually see them in game?
you can go to the bathroom and see it in a mirror, Duke Nukem style. But yeah. Um, yeah, and I one part about Cyberpunk, it does like have a moment at the end where it leverages that a little bit. It'll be interesting to see if the new DLC or all the updates to the game have tweaked the experience in
I
any way. But
remember
we'll talk
seeing
about that
third
later in the
person
month.
mods for like Fallout or whatever. Or maybe it was Oblivion, and they were always so janky, like people wanting to make
Well,
those third person mods.
Well, in Skyrim, and Fallout, there is a natural third person. It's just in those games, it was very rudimentary, at least in my opinion. That's why I call it janky. So it sounds like for Starfield, they've kind of cleaned it up a bit in terms of that. So, what sort of build did you end up going for, James? Are you doing any sort of like I don't even know like what the build options are. I'm assuming there's like a skill related, more techie role, then I'm assuming there's like combat focused skills, or is it not like that at all? I'm making some assumptions here.
So the way that skills work in Starfield is you have like different skill trees. So I think it's I don't know them off the top of my head. There's 5 of them. One of them's tech, one of them's science, which are 2 different things, which is funny. One of them's combat, one of them's social, I believe, and then one of them's like just deals with like physical stuff. I forget the exact name for it. But the way that skills work is every time you level up, you get a skill point, and that skill point can be put towards any one of the skills on those trees. Sorta. At
Okay.
first, so each of these skill trees are kind of split into tiers. They're like layered like a cake. Um, and at the start, you can only invest in the first tier of any of these any of these skill trees skills. And if you want to invest in any of the later tiers, you need to invest in a certain number of skill points in the earlier tiers. Now that can be just unlocking a skill. If you really want to focus in on something, you can do skill challenges, and once you've completed them, you can then invest another skill point in a skill to improve it, and that'll count for the tally you need to start like investing in the later skills on those trees. Um, It's it's an interesting progression system. It's definitely fairly simple, but it's not in a bad way. One thing that's interesting though is that there's a lot of these different skills, but if you want to do some pretty basic stuff that I feel like pretty much anyone playing this game is going to want to do, some of them will really require you to go heavy on a certain skill tree. Like if you want to really invest in shipbuilding, then you need to go really deep into the tech tree because shipbuilding as a skill is locked behind a tier 3 tech tree thing, which means that you have to invest something like 10 skill points into tech alone before you even can unlock shipbuilding. And then obviously, like, there's going to be other skills you want from other trees. So it's going to be one of those things where I guess it's kind of a good thing that for a game like Starfield that's as big and has as much content, that there is like you can look at the skill trees and you can just say, okay, that skill at the bottom of this tree is going to be a long-term goal for me. And maybe you won't actually be able to get to that skill for another like 20-25 hours if you beeline it. Not to mention the fact that if you don't beeline it and you're also going to like spread yourself across like different skills, it might take even longer. Um, so
I like the idea though of having to specialize, and you can't just be good at everything. Like if you want to be good at building ships, you do have to invest in this tech tree, and you can't just like easily spec into it. I like the like that's true, RPG, payoff there, and you can't just spec into everything and be a master of, a master of all trades. Is there like an attribute system? Like in Fallout there's the specials, strength, perception, charisma, intelligence,
no,
whatever.
there isn't.
Okay, so
Um,
it's based the basically the skill trees.
yeah, the other aspect of it is that you have gear and you can install mods on gear to improve them in some ways. So that's your spacesuit, that's your like actual like internal like shirt or apparel or whatnot. That's your like helmet, that's your boost pack, and obviously you can add like specific mods to your weapons. So it's like a lot of improve a lot of like improving your attributes in this game outside of like just skill stuff, which is like more of like a horizontal progression rather than no, I wouldn't even say horizontal progression. You're still like getting stronger in a sense, but as far as like base power or base like stats like defense, vitality, any of that sort of stuff. You don't really have that, but rather it's like, I guess one of the reasons to explore all these planets, even the ones that are barren, is to create outposts so you can get like the resources that you need in order to like create mods for your like equipment to improve it. So I guess that would be the main reason you'd want to explore, because it's not as simple as like, yes, you can find better stuff that has like that randomly has certain mods installed, like maybe even mods that you haven't completed the research or gotten the skill necessary to like create and install them. But if you have like a specific set of gear that you like, if you want to continue improving it, that's going to take a lot of resources. That's going to take a lot of research to unlock the mods in question for creation. Then you need the resources to make the mods. There's definitely a process to it.
So it sounds like the two main modes of like character progression are uh, working your way down these skill trees, and then specifically an item-based, gear-based progression with these resources and mods.
That would be correct.
Sweet. No, it sounds different from what I expect from Bethesda RPGs, but it's something where it doesn't sound too alien. So it seems kind of nice. So you mentioned that your time in this game was over 100 hours already, though you published something on the site, and this has also been going around a couple forums and sites, and people who have covered the game have been different levels of kind of coy about it. Um, about New Game Plus in Starfield, which in the idea of a Bethesda game is a bit alien. New Game Plus is not really a thing in most other games. It's one of those things where you create a character and then you just explore and wander and spend as much time as you want doing whatever you want in the game, and that's your experience with Skyrim or with Fallout 4 or whatever. But Starfield has New Game Plus. Now, I don't know how much you want to say, but it's the way it's implemented apparently is quite interesting.
Okay, so the best way to explain it is that there's like going to be specific choices during not only side quests but the story itself, where you have to choose one thing, like one way or the other, about how something goes down.
Okay.
And so obviously, New Game Plus, you can try a different you can try to do something differently. But the main reason why I put out that feature saying, hey, maybe you want to like beeline the main story and then like really explore a New Game Plus, is because you can bring some things over. You can bring your skills. You can bring some. Well, I don't know how to explain this. That might be a spoiler, so I won't say it. But basically, the one thing you want to know is that any of the actual quests that you have done, any of the outposts that you've made, anything that you've done with ship customization, will not transfer over to New Game Plus. Your skills will, um, and there's at least some side content that is exclusive to New Game Plus. So there's a reason why, if you're trying to like lick the plate, if you're trying to get as much done in Starfield as you can, it would be best to go to New Game Plus as quickly as you can, because once you're in New Game Plus, you can skip the main story and you can just take things at your own pace. And since there is at least some content that is exclusive to New Game Plus, um, that way you're not like spending all this time and like doing all the side quests and then just having like essentially nothing to show for it once you start New Game Plus.
So James, now that you've like, I don't know if you've finished Starfield or if you're in the middle of New Game Plus, or if there's just a lot that you haven't seen it yet at all. Like, I don't know how much time you've like. Have you fully explored it? Is there still a lot that you haven't seen yet? Where do you think you are with the game?
There was not enough time during the review period for anyone to fully explore that game. Like
Mhm.
even saying, oh, there's like 1,000 different plants, but most of them are barren. The fact of the matter is I've only like scratched the surface and like the number of planets that are there. So I, and I'm like, the main reason I'm here on the podcast instead of Alex is that, yeah, he was the reviewer. I'm on guides duty, so
Yeah.
so I'm stuck in here for at least another couple of weeks, I'd imagine. So
Yeah, because
yeah,
you actually have to like reload saves, see the quest outcomes, figure out gear.
yeah,
It's easier to review than it is to guide. Guiding is a lot of work and it's a lot of replaying and it's a lot more hours. Um,
yeah.
especially with all the quest permutations, like what happens if you do this, what happens if you do that,
yeah.
to determine outcomes and whatnot.
Yeah. Yep. So just like Adam, Starfield is definitely on my list, but I kind of got a little bit behind with my work travel. I'm still, like I said, haven't finished Baldur's Gate. But luckily, September
I
is
think
pretty
all three
light.
of us are in the same boat where we've all have like, I don't know, 80 hours into Baldur's Gate or some. We're all like well into Act 2 at least, and none of us have finished it just because we get sidetracked because of other assignments or other games or whatnot.
Yeah. And my joke about September being late was a joke. It's not late. And there's other games like as the year has gone on, like Wolong has had a couple updates. I've managed to play that. Wild Hearts has had a couple updates. I've wanted to play that, but just haven't found time. This year has just been really hard. It's gonna be interesting getting into the Game of the Year podcast and just be like, this game looked good, but I had to take someone else's opinion because I didn't have time to get to it. But anyways, we've complained about that enough in
Yeah.
different podcasts, so I guess I'll kind of
Didn't
leave
you
it at
actually?
that. So many
Didn't
games.
didn't you actually play Wild Hearts though?
No, I played Wild Hearts, but then there was, and I played it to completion, but just there's been a few post-launch monsters and
Yeah.
stuff. I barely touched the post-game stuff. I forget what they called it, but with the red virus version of the enemies, I barely touched. I did like one or two, and then I had to move on to the next game. Uh, just in general, and this is not a surprise to anyone, but is it just me or has this year just been insane in terms of releases? Like, I'm thinking about like quality games that we're going to have to exclude from our top 10 just because there are so many of them. And as a site, we're lucky because games like Armored Core or Street Fighter, we don't even have to consider when other
Yeah.
sites do. Like this year is going to be like we're going to have like some games that
Yeah.
are out of our top 10 or top
I,
5 that are actually excellent, but we just only have so many
I
space.
I'm just gonna be spicy here. I like, at least personally, I don't think 16 isn't even in my top 10 for RPGs this year.
And I don't think that's necessarily that spicy when there's just so many other good games. So
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
have to be excellent.
But yeah, more on that later. But yeah, I was just looking at the game releases this year and I'm just like, man, this is gonna be since I've been on RPG site, which is not a short number of years now, this is gonna be the highest, most interesting, I think, end of the year conversation I think we've had. At least especially compared to the last couple of years where of course, COVID and everything's kind of affected everything. So maybe this is kind of a result of everyone recovering from that and all the projects that have kind of been delayed, all kind of shotgunning out this year. So we'll have more opportunity to talk about Starfield. I mean, I hope we have more opportunity to talk about Starfield. It doesn't get crowded out in all the other releases in September. But of course, Adam mentioned he has plans to get to it. Starfield, I definitely want to be the one of those games that I actually do play by the time I get to the end of the year podcast. That I feel like that would be a big. I'm almost I want to play it almost like out of obligation or duty, where it's like that's one that I don't want to skip. I want to make sure I have a good substantiated opinion on it when it gets to the end of the year.
Yeah.
Um, but we'll see. And then, of course, we'll see if we can get Alex on and other people interested in playing it. So we'll probably have more opportunity to talk about Starfield going forward. Did you have any other like final concluding thoughts on the game, Jay? Oh, I mean, concluding thoughts in this first chance to talk about it on Starfield.
Um, I think it's a great game. I think that it's probably like Alex put it best. This is like the most compelling reason to buy an Xbox in the last decade.
Yeah.
um,
Well,
but I
Alex.
feel like I feel like that's damning with faint praise though, because it's like unless you're a really big fan of Forza Horizon, that's me. It feels like there's not really been a general like actual breakout hit for Microsoft in a
Yeah.
decade. It,
They've had good titles, but of more like niche audience, like Grounded, the audience that's gotten has been really
Pentiment,
strong. Age of Empires 4, very PC centric, even if it did it eventually come out on Xbox proper? I believe it did,
yes,
but
it did.
still a very kind of like a very I don't want to say niche, but a very focused audience, an
Yeah.
art the
Pentiment,
RTS
Hi-Fi
fans.
Rush.
So
High
this
Five
this is
Rush is
this
really good. Yeah.
so this is kind of like their first kind of wide sweeping big project. And based on like I know some people, their expectations were kind of offset from what the delivered product was, but in general, it seems like results are pretty damn good. Like not a failure, pretty highly rated. Some people have more issues than other, whether they're more familiar or less familiar with Bethesda games. I did see like in general, I saw some people like still gaming discourse. People don't understand how averages work in terms of like it's what I don't know what the Metacritic is for Starfield. I think it was like high 80s. And it's like how can so and so give it a 7 or a 6? It's like, do you know what an average is? In order for it to average at 87, that means that half the scores have to be above that and half
Also,
the scores
also,
have to be below that.
I won't say who specifically because they are technically a peer. They're another journalist, but there's been some head ass fucking takes about like saying, "Hey, look, you can't just give a game a 7 out of 10. You do know what you're saying. If you do that, it's like, bro, shut up."
Oh yeah,
And I
if you
saw that
give a game a low score, you're threatening the livelihoods of the developers. It's like, come on.
Like, let me be clear. I agree with Alex's score. He gave it a 9 out of 10, by the way. I would also give it a 9 out of 10. This is excellent. It's one of my favorite games of the year, but I can see why someone would give it a 7 because it's one of those really interesting nines where it's like it's a 9 because it's like a very uneven
Yeah.
project in a lot of ways. And honestly, those are the nines I like the most because it like brings, well, except for the fact discourse for this game's absolutely fucked. Usually it brings like actually interesting discussion to the table. I don't think we're gonna get that for another like month or two. But it'll be nice once we get there.
And then I saw the usual, like, how could you give Starfield a 7 if you gave I don't even remember what the other game was, an 8? It's like, because that's how opinions work. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyways, not enough just bad mouthing, other people behind their back. It's obviously we do have Alex's review up on the site if you want to hear his, or I guess read his full take on Starfield. Alex has written 2 pretty big reviews for us on the site this year, so that's kind of fun. So obviously we'll continue to talk to James and other people as they play through the game on the podcast here to hear some other opinions on Starfield, and then of course we'll talk about it at the end of the year and see how it stacks up with all the other amazing games that release.
God, that really was two games this year where he did the major review, and I've been
Yep.
Yeah,
cool.
I guess I didn't think about that. It was also you stuck on guide duty, so I won't say stuck on because it ends up being pretty good to get all those articles out. But yep,
Hey,
read.
that those Tears of the Kingdom guides paid for the laptop I'm currently on. So
It's kind of fun. And then the other game that came out, oh, was it? I think it was late in August.
Monday,
Yeah, just
last
a couple
Monday.
days before Starfield. That I have put a little bit of time into. A very different scoped title, but one that I think a lot of people have been anticipating for about as long, and that's Sea of Stars. So Sea of Stars is one of this year's several like 16-bit JRPG inspired indie projects. Of course, I'm talking about like Chained Echoes is the one that's kind of been like the main contemporary that's been compared to, but there's been a few others that have been talking about it through the podcast. Others that
Slight
have,
aside, since
Mm,
Chained Echoes came out last December, that's also in the running for like this
yeah.
year's award stuff, and that's a pretty good
Well,
game.
don't
So
worry. Josh doesn't like that game, so he'll make sure it stays out of the top 10. But
also that reminds me, that Marvel tactical RPG came out in December, which was by all accounts in Josh's account also a pretty good game, but maybe not good
oh
enough.
yeah, Midnight Suns. Yeah.
Right. Anyways,
But like, not only do we have Chained Echoes and Sea of Stars, but we have I'm 100 Heroes, of course. That's for next year. Uh, but what was the one that has Sakuraba doing the music?
there's Sacrifier.
That's it. Yeah. So whole bunch of projects that are kind of occupying this um, indie 16-bit inspired space. So the most recent one is Sea of Stars. Sea of Stars was originally kickstarted forever ago, like I think 2019. It's been in the works for quite a while, and Kickstarter. Some games are kickstarted right away. Some games are kickstarted after they've already been in development for a while. From the developers of The Messenger, Sabotage Studios, just released a couple days ago. Our reviewer for the game got a copy kind of late. He wants to make sure he works all the way through it before he writes the review. So we don't have a formal review up on the site quite yet, but the game is out. I did buy it. I downloaded it onto both my PC and my Steam Deck. I've put about like 6 hours into it so far. I kind of, I have Baldur's Gate as my big long RPG that I want to make sure I wrap that up hopefully within the next week or so. But I just wanted to try starting Sea of Stars. From all accounts, it's a little bit more of a shorter game. A lot of comparisons to Chrono Trigger, of course, which is like usually the high watermark as like the perfectly paced 20 to 25-hour RPG. So I'm hoping that's what Sea of Stars ends up being. I believe that's kind of where reviews have been landing for that. And I know I've said this a couple times this year for a couple different games, but my first impressions for Sea of Stars are quite positive. Though I do remember, what game was it? There was another game where I said my first impressions are positive, and then I came back the next week and I'm like, oh, never mind. I don't remember what it
I think
was.
Miasma Chronicles story.
Oh, Miasma
specifically.
Chronicles, that was it. Because Miasma Chronicles between like Act 1 and 2 just gets really stupid.
Yeah, the gameplay is
So
great as a tactical RPG, but the story just gets really dumb really quickly.
yeah, that's what it was. So that was a game that also had a promising start that ended up kind of falling off a little for me. I'm glad I played it, but didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I was going to go in. But anyway, Sea of Stars. So I'll start out with just setting up the premise of the game and then talking about the gameplay a little bit. So Sea of Stars has a dual protagonist system, kind of like Star Ocean 2 or whatever. You can choose to play as either the male protagonist Zale or the female protagonist. It's either Valere or maybe the E is pronounced at the end, so it's still Valerie. I'm not sure. I'll call her Valerie just because it's a more name I'm familiar with. So Zale or Valerie, and they are called Solstice Knights. So they were born. The circumstances of their birth are a little bit vague. It seems like they're brought to an area by someone called the Great Eagle, and they've been, identified as being proficient with magic, which is not, it's basically like they're force sensitive, to like a Star Wars comparison. And so when they're very young, they're pulled away to this academy called the Zenith Academy in order to like strengthen their abilities as these Solstice Knights. Um, the fact that two children were brought on with two consecutive solstices, so like one has lunar powers, Valerie, and one has like solar powers, that's Zale. So the fact that there's two of them and they're treated as like a pair is very interesting. It's kind of implied that they have like more potential. They're like the Anakin Skywalkers of this world, like I guess, that no one knows where they quite came from. They have a lot of magical potential. They go to the academy and they have the potential to save the world. And um you start out, you play a little bit of a flashback where they're kids, where they're at the academy. You go through, you learn like this Jedi Order. Sorry for all the Star Wars comparisons, but it's really the thing that's coming to mind right now. They meet some older knights that basically end up training them. And the interesting thing is that right off the bat, there's a little bit of friction between like what the narrative is purporting to be versus like what the player is made kind of aware that they don't know yet. So, like, for instance, what I mean by that is that this headmaster of the Zenith Academy says, like, "Yeah, we're going to train you two into knights. You're going to help us during the next eclipse." During the eclipses, the demon forces of I think they call it the Fleshmancer. I don't quite remember, but like it's basically like this evil force that I haven't quite met yet weaken during the eclipse, and that's when the solstice knights fight them. Like, you're going to help us during the next eclipse to do our cleansing, is what they call it. It's like this regular ritual. And then these other older knights are like, why are you so eager to train them? We don't need them. But so there's like this friction between the older knights and the headmaster. It seems like he knows more than he's letting all the knights than he's letting on. So basically, some mysteries are kind of seeded early, but in a way that is a little bit subtle. It's not like, oh ho ho, you don't know what's going on. Isn't that mysterious? It's just more in the background. It's a little bit more subtle, where it's like, oh, I don't think I'm getting the full picture here about why these two are actually being trained.
Is it not like overly wink wink, like we're hiding something
Yeah,
from you?
exactly. It's not wink wink, but it's not wink wink, but it is obvious enough where they say like the headmaster and the two older students. I'm blanking on their names right now. I'm sorry, because they're kind of minor characters right at the very beginning. Uh, are shown to have a little bit of friction. But then
Has there been any instance where a character mutters something to themselves, then someone asks them, "What's that?" and they ask, "Oh, it's nothing."
no, not yet, thank goodness. However, there are a few tropes in terms of the storytelling, but like obviously you're gonna have some. You're not gonna come up with original ideas all the way through. Like for instance, there have been like flash sidewayses or whatever you call it, where the perspective changes to like the enemy faction, and it's four masked like Akatsuki, and they call themselves just 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they all have like different weapons, like 1, are you keeping a track on them? No, 3, I thought that was your job. Well, 4 is over there and he's not even paying attention. So it's like this League of Villains sort of thing where it's like, oh, I bet I'm gonna have to fight these consulars in sequence at some point. Like, what faction are they working for? Are they in league with the headmaster? I don't know. So like it's like, but the thing is that the story is delivered in a way where it doesn't feel too like I've seen this before, etc. I know that was one of Josh's main criticisms with Chained Echoes, was that it was just all referential and didn't really do a lot of its own original kind of creation of a story. Uh, I think he was a little harsh on that, though I can see where he's coming from. I think Sea of Stars kind of avoids being quite as overt about it, where he uses some of the ideas, but it frames it a little bit more gently. Um, then after you play about maybe an hour and a half, you finish all your training. The two characters master all their magic, and they basically are given kind of like a very basic, almost like a one sentence prophecy, like a Final Fantasy 13 focus. Like, this is what you've been set out to do by the elder wind spirit. Basically tells them what they have to go out to the world and set out to do. And I know for Valerie's, it was like, uh, you should seek out the ability to walk on water. And I forget what Zales were, but kind of very open ended. Not in terms of like you're going to go to the. One thing I forgot to say is that this Zenith Academy and the village that they're from is like floating in the sky, so they can basically like descend to the planet, and that's where they're like the real adventure starts, quote unquote. And their first task is basically to find a ship of adventurers that will help them explore the planet and be able to just seek out the denizens of the world. And so far, all of the stories so far have been very like self-contained. One of the very first stories you run into is you find this village of mole people, and they are like miners at the top of this mountain that has like this magical attribute where there's like wind power in this mountains. Uh, and you kind of take this at face value, and you're just like, oh, they're miners, and this mountain happens to have magic. But one thing, and this was pretty clearly shown in the trailers, and it was something that they marketed pretty heavily, is that around this mountain there's this giant sleeping serpentine dragon.
Yeah.
The art, by the way, looks really very, very, very nice, and um, it's a prettier game than Chained Echoes, though I think Chained Echoes is pretty good looking in its own right. They really kind of nailed the style. It's not quite HD 2D, but they do some really cool stuff with the lighting. They do a lot of stuff with scale. The sleeping dragon just looks awesome. And one thing that this game does do really well is that you solve this little tiny short 1 hour story where you help clear out with this wind mine and help these mole people out. But then you learn, you find an artifact and join a character named Teeks kind of joins your crew pretty early on, and she's like an arcane historian. And what she does, she has like a magical book that if you show her an artifact, the book will immediately like recount the story of that artifact. Um, the first one that you get is like the tutorial about as like the tutorial of the mechanic introduces like a ghost ship, which I haven't met yet in person, but at least now it's kind of like it's been teased, like, oh, there's a ghost ship. I don't know if that's gonna be part of the main quest, if it's gonna be something for me to find, or hell, maybe it's just world building and it doesn't interface directly. But in this mine, you find another artifact, and it's not a required item. You have to kind of dig and find it. You can give it to the historian. The book fills it out. You can hear the story, and it talks about in ages past there was a war between these serpentine creatures that I haven't met yet and the mole people. And this giant serpentine dragon was summoned, and then in order to the mole people didn't have the strength to combat the dragon directly. So what they did is they used their magical abilities at the time and the mountain that they were located on to basically turn the mountain into like a giant like ocarina, like a wind instrument, to lull the dragon to sleep. That's why it's sleeping curled around the mountain. And it says since then the mole people have kind of lost their magical affinity, but they maintain the mountain so that the dragon stays asleep. So that's just like a fun little side story, but the way that it was presented was actually just really clever. Like you interface with the mountain, you see all the magic in it, you see the dragon, and then you optionally get the objective to kind of hear the history of the place. And then the history of the place
So
also just
basically, what you're getting
introduces.
at is that, I'll be honest, you seemed like you were basically just telling the whole story of the game, but the the way that it's presented is not just like a giant exposition dump. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So the story of the game is more, at least so far in the first 5 or 6 hours, it's more like these self-contained interlocking mini stories. in a way. And there's a narrative term for that I'm blanking on. But I prefer that a lot. And the thing is that if you're not interested in that, you don't have to read that stuff. Um, but I think it's interesting. It's well done. I did see some, I think not famously, but kind of high profile. Jason Schreier said that he really struggled with the English text of the game because clearly it's translated. I forget where Sabotage is um, located in,
They're French
and
Canadian.
Are they
okay,
Quebecois?
but and I can kind of tell that the dialogue does feel a little bit stilted. The characters have a um kind of they tend to talk in like very long sentences in a way that a person wouldn't normally talk. And it's I haven't found like any errors or anything. It's just sometimes a little bit hard to read uh in ways. But here and I know this won't help um for the listeners, but I'll put something in the chat here. But just the way that things are phrased can be a little bit stilted, but it really hasn't affected my enjoyment too much. But it is there. But it doesn't make the game hard to follow or anything, and there's no translation errors as far as I can tell. But just the dialogue sometimes doesn't feel natural, like it flows. Like one thing that Adam kind of likes to use in his games reviews. Most recently, I think about Neo: The World Ends with You, where when the characters are written, where you can read their voice from the text without voice acting. I don't quite get that in this game. This game doesn't quite reach that in terms of the voice acting. All the text just kind of feels like text, like a
Well,
narrator's
there's
talking
no voice
almost.
acting, right? You just mean like each character kind of speaks the same way.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like they don't have like the text doesn't as clearly list their voice. It does in some ways. There's a character named Garl who is like your non-magic friend. And Garl kind of I really like his character so far. He's treated as like the non-magic friend. The two main characters had to like leave him behind for all the years they're at the academy because he couldn't go. He's a little bit of a bigger character. He's like the warrior cook. He likes to eat. So very easily could have just been like the jokey sidekick hanging hanger on.
I like food
However,
type of guy.
yeah, exactly. He could have been the wedge of this game. However, because the other two characters spent most of their childhood in this like academy, they're actually both shown to have a similar weakness where they're both like not very social. They're kind of quiet. They're a little bit timid, which for two protagonists is actually kind of interesting. But then they've got Garl there, who is this big, just like gregarious, hug everyone sort of character. He even takes the lead in a lot of dialogue, like, "Hey, these mole people need help. We should help them." And he's not the protagonist, which I just think is a really interesting dynamic.
You know what that
So the
reminds
reason
me
why I
of, the
go
way you describe it anyway? That kind of reminds me
what
of Sylvando in Dragon Quest 11, where he's like
a little bit,
not the main character, but kind of takes once he joins, he sort of just takes charge anyway.
yeah, and a little bit of that is because the main character there is mute.
That's true.
But it's similar sort of vibe, and I kind of just bring that up as like this game doesn't do anything that we haven't seen before, but the way that it's been put together so far with like the little story there and how with the mole people and the dragon, how they implemented Garl into the game, just really kind of it's doing everything well in my time with it so far. In terms of the combat, it's still opening it up to me a little bit. The reason why I focus mostly on story and not as much on gameplay right now is the gameplay right now. I still think even within like the first 6 hours, is still kind of opening up. Um, it does have very clear chrono trigger inspiration where if you run into an enemy, your characters and the enemy characters will shuffle into kind of different positions on the world map, not a separated battle screen. There is a little bit of positioning based combat where like if three characters are in a line and you're doing like a sweeping arc attack and you target the middle one, it'll hit the two on the sides as well.
I've heard that the
Um,
game kind of has like a Mario RPG kind of feel in terms of some abilities. You don't just select them from a menu. You sometimes have to do maybe a little bit of a button timing sequence. Is that right?
y- yeah, and it's usually pretty simple. Like press the A button as soon as your attack can't lands, and you'll hit twice. Press the A button as soon as an attack hits you, and you'll defend and take partial damage. But some of the combo abilities are a little bit more involved. But still, usually about like holding a button and releasing with good timing, things like that.
I
So
mean,
it's nothing super. Just
that sounds like a Mario RPG to me. Not maybe not some of the later ones that get like kind of overwrought in those button sequences, but
yeah,
yeah.
so yeah, nothing super complicated there, but it's enough to feel a little bit more engaging. So it's exactly what it's set out to be. I will say that each character starts out with like a couple abilities, and you unlock other abilities quite slowly. like, so I've been using like the same couple abilities. Like Valerie starts out with like a sweeping attack, and one of the earliest things they showed in like the Kickstarter was this ability where she shoots like a magical like moon shuriken out and keeps knocking it back with her staff. And you can kind of like play like Zelda
Phantom Gleam.
catch like
Yeah.
and that's a really fun ability because it hits every enemy on the screen if you do it long enough. So it's kind of fun. With Zale, you charge up a fireball. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I think the combat's kind of doled out, at least the progression in the combat, a little bit slowly. It's not terrible or bad. It's just I kind of wish I had unlocked more abilities more quickly. You do get combo abilities pretty regularly, and those are kind of fun because you actually have to like find them in dungeons with little micro puzzles. So they're not just doled out like, oh, you're level 5, now you access this ability. It's like, no, you explored this dungeon, you found it, and here you go. And the combo abilities are I don't remember which game you would credit this to because there are a lot of them where if you have two specific characters in the party, they can do the combo ability. Some of them are offensive. One of them is like a group heal, etc. The nice thing about them is that you can use them to specifically hit multiple enemy weaknesses at the same time.
I said this in a previous podcast. I think it was one of the ones you weren't here. This game, I have seen some comparisons to Chained Echoes, which makes sense. They're both indie throwback RPGs. And Chained Echoes has a lot of characters. I think I said 16 in a previous podcast. It's actually 12. I miscounted. But in Chained Echoes, pretty early on, you can kind of build very different parties depending on who you decide to choose. And in that game, who's in the front line, who's in the back line. But in this game, as far as I can tell, there's the 3 characters that have been on the marketing forever. The 2 Solstice Warriors and what's his name? Garl? And then they recently announced there's a ninja character, which I don't know if you've met her yet. So I'm wondering, there's 3 people in the party?
Sarai, yeah.
And then
there's 3 people in a party.
And then maybe there's like there's a 4th character that you can swap in and out. I wonder if there's more. So I'm just thinking that the party dynamics are going to be I'm talking mechanically here, are going to be pretty different. And also maybe just like character writing, if you have less characters to focus on, might come across pretty differently too.
So just to make sure, because I'm not far enough yet, I did look this up just to make sure I'm not giving incomplete information. I have the 4 characters. It looks like there are, at least according to the site I Googled, Prima Games, 2 more. So party of 6.
Okay.
Which to me, playable 3, 6 characters, that seems good. And like Chained Echoes did have 12, but you could effectively use 8 in battle at a time. So it still worked out okay.
Mm-hmm.
The 3 characters I have pretty clear roles. So hopefully the 4 characters I have.
Wait, who's the 4th character?
Sarai, the ninja. Sarai.
Oh, you have Sarai. I sort of assumed you hadn't met her yet. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So I haven't met the other 2 yet, and I read their names on this site I Googled, but I don't know. I haven't met them yet.
Spoil it.
All right, yeah. I assume they're all gotten pretty early though. So, combat
Let me just say that I kind of actually appreciate that the marketing didn't just like, here are all the playable characters, because like I have no idea who the other 2, the 5th and the 6th, are because they didn't introduce them, and I kind of like that.
Yep. And the progression is pretty. Like the dungeons in the game, I was worried after the first couple that they were very much like Octopath, where they're like a pretty straight line, and then you like, oh, here's a clear dead end side path that you go to get a chest. The first couple dungeons are very much like that, but then eventually you there's some verticality. You can climb up and down. There's certain like parts of the floor that you have to jump down from a high elevation to break through. Eventually you get the ability to push blocks, so you can do some basic block puzzles that have been in like so many different top-down games. So eventually it kind of opens up where no individual component I just named really changes it too much, but there's enough to keep some variety in the dungeons and actually have a little bit of non-linearity and some hidden paths. There's one dungeon that has like a lot of flowing water, so there's certain areas that you can only go through one way. I will say though that this game is a lot of exploration in terms of like on the field doing combat. It does have moments like when you're in the mole village and when you're in the village that's in the port village that's in the demo is about 2.5 hours into the game. So there's a little bit there, but it's not a focus of the game. So this is not really a game where you get immersed into talking to a ton of NPCs, like a Kiseki game where you're going to Crossbell and it has tons of districts and tons of characters and they all have something new to say at every moment. Like it doesn't have a lot of that, which I think is fine. It doesn't focus on that. It has just enough. There's a couple of minor side quests They're not explicitly listed as side quests like in a log, but like for instance, as soon as you get the ability to push blocks, you can kind of go into back into old places and old villages and kind of find little chests that were tucked away in a very minor Metroidvania-esque sort of thing where it's like, hey, you can access more chests here. Those chests might have more artifacts for the historian to talk to you about. I don't know. You collect a few things called like rainbow conches and a
Yeah, I
few other
mean,
things
Chrono
that
Trigger had similar stuff.
yeah, so nothing explicitly listed as side quests, but just some reasons to explore old areas. There is a fishing mini game, but it seems very kind of rudimentary. It's not bad. It's just kind of there. If when you fish, it looks like there's like a list of fish, and I looked at the achievement list. There's an achievement for getting all the fish in the game. Um, there's a whole mechanic about cooking food. You get recipes, and then you can cook them at a campsite, and they do things like heal HP or MP or for one character of the party. It's very much like Tales games where you can have like the items that heal you from like the shops, but also you can like cook the food, and it's a lot more economical way to make the healing items. That's what this game is. It's like all the healing items are food items. So a lot of the game's like economy, like when you beat, like why would you go and grind these enemies? Oh, they might drop an item for a certain recipe, or this dungeon might have a lot of mushrooms which you need for a certain recipe. So that's a lot of the item economy in the game. Most of the weapon and gear economy is like you either buy it or you find it in a chest. I haven't done like any side quests, like because you did the side quest, you get this ultimate weapon. It seems like the sort of thing that if it happens, it would happen later anyway. But yeah. So those are my first couple hours of Sea of Stars. I'll likely, if I get a chance, talk about it again next week. I'm hoping this is one I can kind of knock out fairly quickly. But good impressions. Do I like it more or less than Chained Echoes right now? Uh, I think I like the moment to moment character talk, because Chained Echoes also had a little bit of the dialogue stilted,
Yeah, because I think
not
that's a
quite
German translation, right?
right. So they kind of both are in a similar space there, but I think the characters in Sea of Stars so far are a little bit more interesting. I mentioned like the two protagonists kind of have a unique dynamic that I don't see in a lot of other games. Garl's really fun. The other characters so far are pretty fun. But yeah, that's been time with Sea of Stars so far.
Yeah, I definitely want to get
Um,
to it. And I think I said in the last podcast, going from a gigantic game, Baldur's Gate, to a gigantic game, Starfield, it's nice to have a 20, 30 hour RPG in the middle there.
yeah, the tiny 20-hour game. So
Yeah,
kind of, yeah,
just,
we're boiled frogs.
yep.
So I won't spend too much time on this because I know it's a pretty niche game. But one other game that I played as soon as I got back from my travel was Guild Wars 2 actually did the first release of their new style of expansions. So they had their End of Dragons expansion last year as kind of like their big send off to the initial story of the game, kind of like a diet version of Endwalker. And then the arena announced that they're going to go to these yearly kind of content drops, kind of like a Destiny or a Elder Scrolls Online. So in a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, they had their first version of that with Secrets of the Obscure. So I played through that. I played through the story. So like most MMOs, or at least the ones I've played in terms of how long does it take to beat? Like if you beeline the story of the game, it doesn't take that long, but there's a lot of side content, a lot of like collections and achievements and exploration and lots of other like side objectives to kind of dig into as well. So I'm kind of still doing sort of that. I will say that it definitely kind of feels shorter in terms of like the content of the game, though the subject material that they decided to go into, I thought was very interesting. It's nice to be able to go into a story that's a little bit more divorced from the ongoing story, where it's like, well, I haven't played the last 10 years of the game. Like, I'm never going to be able to play what's like, if I only play this expansion, am I going to be completely lost? And the answer is honestly like no, because it starts to introduce a lot of new characters that none of us have met before in an area that none of us have been to before, answering questions that none of us have any insight into. So I think that's kind of one thing that's kind of just smart as kind of a placement for like, hey, you've got a game that's 12 years old. How do you get new blood into the game? Well, you don't tell them you've got 10 years worth of stuff that you have to play through in order for this to make sense. So like, yeah, if you play through that stuff, you're going to get a lot more context and world building. But specifically, the story we're getting into here, they're new characters. You're meeting them at the same time as everyone else. The story is touching on material that you're kind of learning about at the same time as everyone else. So it's a little bit more entry friendly, which I think was deliberate. I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure that was
I
deliberate.
wonder if uh, I
Um,
wonder if Elder Scrolls Online still I know they've had so many expansions for Elder Scrolls Online now, and I know at least early on it was basically meant you can do any expansion in any order,
Mhm.
kind of meant to be, kind of maybe avoid the quote problem that Final Fantasy 14 has, perhaps, where you kind of have to play it in sequence to catch up. Where
Well, I think Final Fantasy XIV's newest expansion is doing a similar
yeah,
thing where
maybe.
it's because they're marketing it as like, and then maybe James can speak in here as like a step away
Now I
from
know
the
a lot of
events.
people like that
Well, no,
long
no,
form
no, no, no.
storytelling,
The
but
problem
All right,
just
is
James,
that
correct us here.
the
Correct us here,
problem
James.
is that because of a certain character that's in, well, this is following up on the patch quests from and Walker. And actually, sorry, let me get closer to my mic. I've been eating.
No
Yeah,
worries.
no, this is following up on the patch quests of Walker. It's not going to be a new jumping in point.
Mhm.
And they've said that they don't intend it to be a new jumping in point. Uh, I would say though that 14's issue is just very specifically 14's issue. And I mean, like, even Brian can attest to the fact that technically you can do any expansion in any order in 11 if you wanted to, for example.
Oh,
So,
yep.
well, I know a lot of people
And
like that sort of long form storytelling that you can have, character events and building and story and narrative that you can't do in a shorter, shorter, like in a normally length RPG. But it's just kind of interesting from that like Elder Scrolls Online perspective, where you can basically do any expansion in any order. There's not a huge sequence of events. There's not a big long storyline. And Brian was just saying that the this new expansion can be. Are you saying that you can just go to this one first if you want?
yeah, but they're really trying to thread a needle. Like one of the
Yeah,
major
I
characters in the
imagine.
new expansion is Zaja, who is Zaja. I forget if it's a long O or short O. She is a character from the base game, and she's a character from the first expansion, but she didn't show up in the last two. So she's still like it's kind of like having your cake and eating it too a little bit. Like Saja, I don't know who. Like, don't worry, no one else has seen her in like 8 years either, so don't worry about it. You're meeting her for the first time, and you're not too far behind. But also, like, if you have been here since the beginning, it's a little bit of like, oh my god, she's back, that sort of thing. And there
Yeah.
are like other returning characters, and there's also a lot. We talked about this a little bit back when this was announced. There's like some they're doing some payoff for some mysteries that were never followed up on from like the first game from like
Oh yeah.
17 years ago
I
where
mentioned
it's
this. I mentioned this when we when this expansion was announced, and that it's tied to the Villainy of Galrath quest. Like I
eh,
remember that from
uh,
like 2005.
guess what, Galrath is in the expansion. He
I
just
am
is.
not surprised.
Yeah, so it's very much like it's a wink and a nudge for longtime fans. But if you also haven't been there, it doesn't really matter in terms of like what do you get from recognizing the character? Not a whole lot other than that little bit of a nostalgic like throwback, fan service, I guess, in a way. The story is a lot more, I guess, dark because it involves like a demon realm. One thing that they've done pretty interestingly is that one of the raids, which is a content form that unfortunately ArenaNet's kind of dropped over the last couple of years, but one of the raids from about the 2016-17 era had a final boss where you fought a demon named Deimos. And at the time, it was like this big enigma. Like, where the hell? Like, we don't fight demons in this game. Where the hell did this guy come from? And I'm pretty sure at the time the developers didn't have this planned. They're just like, we'll figure it out later. And now they're kind of like retroactively being like, oh yeah, the demon realm. Remember Deimos? Yeah, we're going to reference him here, sort of thing. Where it's like, if you had played the raid story, then you get a little bit more from that, but you don't have to because he's off screen. So I think they're doing a lot of real careful stuff with the story here, where it's like make it just as accessible to someone who might have played the base game and this is their first expansion, or someone who's been here the whole run. They want to make sure that you get the payoff in all the ways that you can. It does feel shorter. It's one of those things where you buy the expansion because Guild Wars has this buy to play model. Where you buy the expansion, and then what that means is you get the major content drop now, and then in 3 months you get its version of the point one.
Now,
I don't know what you
regular
want to
Guild
call
Wars
it
2, like just the base game is free to play now, right? It's just the expansions that cost money.
exactly. The first two expansions are bundled together. Then End of Dragons is separate, and now
Because I
Secret to
know it used to
Vizsla
be
is
you buy the
separate.
base game, no subscription fee, then you buy the expansions. But I think they
Yeah,
basically said, okay, expansion still costs money, but the base game is now free to play. And I know
yeah,
there's
and there,
like
it's
it's free to play, but then you can buy currency or whatever,
yeah,
right?
and it's yeah. There's a cash shop. Some people say it's super unintrusive. Some people say it sucks. I think it's kind of in the middle, or it like your inventory space is a little bit limited if you don't utilize like buying more bag slots or whatever. But anything in the cash shop you can earn in game because you can translate one currency to another. There's no credit card exclusive currency. I'll put it that way. So that's kind of nice. And having played like Phantasy Star Online 2, I know it can be so much worse. That game, I have no idea how anyone plays without spending any real money, etc. It is hard to judge because like the story, it doesn't leave on a cliffhanger, but it kind of leaves off at like we solved the first immediate problem, but what next? Check back in 2 months when we drop the next patch, sort of thing. Where it's like, oh, okay. So the main thing that I think I took away as a positive from this expansion is that End of Dragons was only a year and a half ago, but yet they've already been able to kind of regulate their content development to say like a year and a half later, here's a bunch of new assets, a bunch of new quests, a bunch of new gear, new maps, etc. Where before that would come in at like a drip feed rate, and now they've managed to at least get something out pretty quickly. But then that what they did get out doesn't last as long because obviously they are intending to release these yearly, so it kind of is give and take. Um, but but yeah, enjoyed it. I think I kind of got the lion's share of what I wanted to get out of it, so I can go back to Baldur's Gate and Sea of Stars. But I'll check back in 3 months to see how the stuff continues. It's one of those things where it's like, is the mini expansion idea going to be a success for ArenaNet? Well, you can't really judge that until they get like at least 2 or 3 out. Basically, their problem the entire time has always been regularity of their content. Can they keep up with the schedule? Can they have like that's the sort of thing that Final Fantasy 14 kind of championed itself on, where it's like you kind of know roughly when the expansion is going to drop, what's going to come in with each patch. Where with ArenaNet, it's like throw darts while blindfolded at a dartboard a mile away. It's like what you got to get in a year, who knows? So if they can have some sort of regularity with this new content format, I think that'll be good for the game in the long run. But we'll see if they manage to hold on to that. There's still always rumblings. I heard a rumor. I don't like, and this is not this is no inside information at all. A Guild Wars 2 YouTuber mentioned this, is that they think ArenaNet might be co-developing the Horizon MMO, but they were also supposedly developing like an in progress Dune MMO, Project Arrakis, which never came to be. And so, like, there's always been sorts of things where they've been working something on the background. You would follow developers on their LinkedIn pages, go and get hired and start working there. Then they would leave and nothing would come from it. So it's always kind of been this black box of like, they have the Guild Wars team, and then they've got everyone else. What the heck are they working on? No one knows. And it's been like that for 8 years. It's almost kind of frustrating. Yep. So, anyways, and with that, I think we have covered all the new releases for at least the first week of September. More to come. Before we go into the news, a couple of article shout outs here. We did get an article op-ed from Paul, who had recently done a feature on was it on Thousand Year Door?
No, it was on Super Paper Mario.
Oh, okay. No, didn't he do one like last month though on the Thousand Year Door?
He did one on Mario RPG, I think.
Oh, he did one on general. All right, I pulled it up. So sorry about being confusing there. In June, he wrote an op-ed called "The Next Paper Mario Should Lean into the Series RPG Roots." So he kind of brought up Thousand Year Door in that game, and of course the original. That was, I think, right around the time the Super Mario RPG like remaster was announced, which is not the same as Paper Mario, but clearly like in a similar space as those original games. So it's kind of an interesting discussion here. But he wrote a new feature that went up a week ago. Super Paper Mario is a gateway to the genre for younger gamers. So kind of just an interesting, very specific perspective on the game Super Paper Mario, which has always been divisive ever since it released, as like for Paper Mario series, people either consider Super Paper Mario as the point where it jumped the shark, or Sticker Star as the point where it jumped the shark, because Super Paper Mario is just kind of like slotted in there as kind of like its own weird, obscure thing.
So two things. One, Paul has like really young children. I think like the oldest is like 6 or 7, and then there's 3 of them in that age range, like 3 to 7,
Mm-hmm.
and they saw the Mario movie and basically are now Mario obsessed, as kids tend to get, obsessed over.
That's kind of fun. That's cute.
Yeah, and then so like apparently they like went to the library or whatever, look up Mario books and Mario games, and they saw Super Paper Mario, and literally this little op-ed came out of playing this game with his children who are very young, and teaching them about like this is how you play an RPG. And it's we all know as adults that it's not like a traditional RPG, but like in terms of level ups and getting stronger and all that. And this editorial is basically just kind of a written up experience of him being a dad playing with really young children of a game like this. My personal take on Super Paper Mario is when it first came out, I wasn't super happy with it. I just, I think at the time I wanted just another traditional Paper Mario game, and like, I don't really like the side scroller style. And then after Sticker Star, and then later Color Splash, I'm like, you know what? Super Paper Mario is actually pretty good just for what it was. It's different, but it's fine. Like, it's better than the games that came after it.
Mm-hmm. I do think the fact that Sticker Star and what was the one after that?
Color Splash.
Which you Color Splash. Those ones like lost the original audience so hard that I think like Super Paper Mario kind of benefited from that. It's like,
Yeah.
well, I guess that one was all right, sort
Right,
of thing.
exactly.
And I know we're biased, our site in our coverage slant. And
Hey, Origami King is pretty good.
And we covered that, even though by all rights we probably shouldn't have, but it was pretty good. So yeah, thank you for providing some of the kind of like the background on that op-ed. That's really kind of an interesting perspective. And then the other feature outside of the Starfield review that went up on the site this week is that Paige covered the console release of Virgo versus the Zodiac. This is an indie game that was originally published on Steam back in 2019. Just recently, I don't know exactly when. Let me double check. Just August 23rd came out on all the consoles: Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, Series, PlayStation 4 and 5. So Paige covered the console release of that game and wrote a review up for Virgo versus the Zodiac on the site as well. I think in terms of article shoutouts, that covers most everything. I know obviously James is working on all the Starfield guides, so those are all coming out over the next probably several weeks. So we have those all up on the site as well. And then of course also the usual shout out. Adam has, since we've gone into September, updated the release window, and all of our RPGs of 2023 article has been updated and pushed back near the top and tweeted out just yesterday, I think, with all the games coming out this month. Going into the news, like I said at the top here, really not any cohesive theme to this, and a lot of this is kind of trailers for upcoming games, which trailers are the hardest bits of news to talk about in a podcast format, at least not a video podcast. Um, just because obviously they're visual marketing and this is an audio format. So all we can really talk about is our like reaction to the trailer. So we have a bunch of those here, but we might not be able to latch on to any individual news bit as strongly as we can. Before we get into that, we have a couple of announcements here, kind of a smattering here. So in no particular order, we were talking about MMOs. One game that came out a couple years ago that we really haven't covered on the site just because we don't have anyone in that space is New World. So I played a little bit of it when it was in like testing, but I never played the official release. I don't think I ever will just because of time. But New World and Amazon Games have announced their first expansion, Rise of the Angry Earth, is launching on October 3rd. So
that's
in
a
basically
pretty quick turnaround from announcement to release.
Yeah, like saying, "Hey, we're having an expansion to our MMO. It's coming out in a month." So this was announced with a kind of a cinematic trailer, which is kind of the same way Final Fantasy does it, not the way ArenaNet does it. So in terms of, I'm just gonna be honest here. None of us know enough about New World to be able to read this press release to specifically talk about like how this is going to shake up the game, how much content's being added, what sort of format is. They are raising the level cap, so they are kind of treating it like a more traditional MMO expansion. It does, I know, based on the press release, affect the initial starting area of First Light in some way. So that's interesting. That it's going to have some sort of like permanent change to the world space. The trailer seems to show like some basically history of this island before the arrival of the outer people, the player faction. But in terms of that, we can't really speak to what this is going to add. But this game, its Steam player numbers have always maintained pretty high and steady numbers, despite certain spheres seeming to talk about it as if it's a failure.
Yeah,
I don't know that we
16,000
can say
right
that.
now. I mean,
Yeah. So Coming out in a month. It looks like it has a base game, but also it'll be it has a base expansion of $30, and it will be also bundled with the base game and in a bundle for $70. Also, it adds a weapon type, the flail. So there you go. We have the announcement of a new CRPG coming out next year. It is a steampunk RPG called New Arc Line from publisher Dreammate, who I don't recognize. But we have a cinematic trailer as well as some like mock gameplay for this game that was put on IGN's YouTube channel. It was one of their exclusive marketing things, which seem to be more and more common recently, at
There's
least for these
some
smaller titles.
there's some funny like inside baseball for this. So this announcement goes up on IGN. About a day after I get the news post out, we get an email from them saying, "Hey, we got this announcement coming up. It's embargoed for X date." And it's like, no, the information's already out there. We had already posted about it before you sent this. What are you doing?
Yeah, this
That's
is
strange.
this is
I
where
didn't know
this is where it
that.
gets annoying. Where clearly some agreement is made with IGN being the biggest game website and these publishers. Like, hey, transfer some money. We will have the exclusive announcement for this game, and then that means when we are looking up information for this game, we can't go to the publisher. We don't have a press release or anything. We just have to say, okay, here's what IGN said. So it's like announced but embargoed. It's very strange.
But yeah, but we're fine with that. Like if IGN has a scoop on a game and we don't, we're like, all right,
Yeah,
here's the trailer from IGN's YouTube channel. Like, oh
Yeah,
well, like
and
that's
if
not
they
a big deal.
actually get mad, it's like, who gives a shit?
right.
it's on their YouTube channel. So yeah, this game or the trailer for this doesn't show a lot of the gameplay, though it shows some like isometric perspectives without any UI. That seems like it might be trying to emulate what gameplay might look like. They call it cyberpunk or sorry, steampunk, but it has a vibe that's very like BioShock-ish or what is InXile's new game? Clockwork
Clockwork.
Revolution. Uh, so it has that sort of vibe initially, though it does go into more like horror elements later in the trailer. So it has more like Resident Evil feel to that. So kind of an interesting vibe. Uh, Hard to really judge too much because it's just like a little 90-second introductory trailer. But kind of an interesting concept that is supposedly going to release on both consoles and PCs next year. So we'll keep an eye out for it. Here's a kind of an unexpected announcement. We got the announcement of a standalone spin-off roguelike for Lost Eidolons. Lost Eidolons was kind of like that Fire Emblem-like indie game with a Western aesthetic that released, what was it, October of last year,
Yep.
I believe. And one of the games that I remember saying that I was interested in playing it, but as always, didn't have time. Um, then eventually it released on console, but we are a surprising announcement of Lost Eidolons: Veil of the Witch. So this is also a strategy-based game, but it has a roguelike like parameter to it. So PC exclusive announcement for now, coming out next year for I guess the Legion of Lost Eidolons fans. Kind of interesting, but it must have done well enough for them to support the development of this new game.
I mean, I
So
heard the game has
good to
got, mostly positive reception. Maybe not like outstanding reception, but people seem to like it.
And Scott did play it for our site last year, so we're not completely blind to it, but he just thought it was, good, not great. It was fine. Um, so good enough to have, you know, pushed for the creation and development of the new spinoff. So that'll come out next year. I don't know if Scott's really interested in it, but we'll see. And then here's a kind of an announcement that I had to ask Adam a couple questions about here because I had a hard time parsing this. So back in the era of like Japanese feature phones, when they get all the exclusive games, this was when like Final Fantasy Before Crisis was a phone game. That Xenosaga Pied Piper was a phone game, like the late aughts
Yeah.
before like the iPhone released and kind of standardized, mobile app ecosystems. There was one for based on the original Persona. I'm not gonna. Well, I guess I will have to attempt to say the name. Megami Ibanroku Persona Ukuno Tonhen. So I probably murdered that, but it's a spin-off of the original Persona game that was a game for Japanese feature phones that originally came out, I believe, in 2006. However, it seems like, and Adam, take it away if you need to, but a lot of these games have been ported to both Switch and PC in Japan as part of like this ongoing effort to kind of like archive those games in a kind of a more conducive, comprehensive fashion called like the G Modes Archive. What is this?
I'm actually not super familiar with this. I just know the Gmode archive, yeah, like you said, is basically just some sort of like collection of re-releases of these sorts of feature phone and maybe other kind of niche platform games. And right now they're just Japan only. I believe, you can buy them from the Japanese store if you want to play these in Japanese, but none of them have been translated as far as I'm aware. So there's no reason to believe this will be. I mean, who would? So that's all I really know about it.
But yeah, it's still obviously good for, preservation of the game. And then if it does end up on PC in this fashion, that might mean that it might be more conducive to like fan related mods or translation, sorry, down the line. So interesting to see and good to know that, someone is making sure that these old games don't get lost to time. What was that statistic that was released by one of those like study groups a couple weeks back where it said like 87% of all games ever made you can't play anymore or you can't buy anymore.
Yep.
So the more that we can shrink that number down, the better, just in terms of preservation. With that, we'll go into not new game announcements, but new ports. A game that we talked about not too long ago. Adam reviewed it for us. Jagged Alliance 3, released in July for PC. It was announced that it will also release on PlayStation and Xbox consoles later this year, but no release date was explicitly given. Alongside the
There's a release date on the publisher's website store page.
oh, okay.
I believe
So they
James
so
reported it like November 16th or something like that. It was just kind of a weird, odd, small thing where they didn't explicitly say this is the release date, but they're like, you can buy it from this page, and then if you go to the page and then go to buy it, it says November
Yeah.
16. So like, okay, is that the
oh
date? I guess. So
yeah. Why did you say so? But yeah, Adam, you like this game well
yep,
enough.
yep.
So, but though, can you imagine playing it in with a controller?
No, this is one of those games, and I don't mean to be like, I don't know, you know, I don't even know what the word is, but like you can only play it on keyboard and mouse. But
We
it seems like
just
the type of game that is very much well suited to keyboard mouse. Like I wouldn't
we
personally
just
wouldn't try playing it with the controller, or like maybe gatekeeper. I don't want to be the gatekeeper. Like you have to play this on PC. Like maybe the console controls will be good. I don't know. It just seems very well
Speaking of, just
suited with keyboard mouse.
as a very short tangent, I did play a tiny amount of Baldur's Gate 3 during my trip on the Steam Deck, and it took me a long time to get used to the console controls or like the keyboard controls, not the keyboard, button controls.
yeah.
Which obviously like it's coming out on PlayStation any day now, right? So
Next week, I think.
Yep. Same
and
day
then
as
obviously not
Starfield's
the
regular launch.
and not the first for Larian, because obviously Divinity Games did so as well. And eventually I did manage it. I managed to get through a couple of quest lines using the controller, layout on the Steam Deck and Baldur's Gate 3. So like it can be done when you have no other option. I would prefer keyboard and mouse, but the controller controls do work pretty well once you get used to them. So hopefully the same is true for Jagged Alliance 3 once it launches on the consoles in November. Not an announcement, but basically the prelude to an announcement. Gamatsu, as they're keen to do, noticed that the ESRB has rated PlayStation 5 specific versions of Trails of Cold Steel 3 and 4. Shouldn't really be a surprise because Trails into Reverie obviously got a PS5 release. East 10, sorry, not East 10, East 9 got ported to PS5.
And Ace
Um,
8.
and East 8.
Yeah, and
So
it's probably worth mentioning that like Reverie, did that get a PS5 version in Japan?
No.
No, so that was an NIS America thing.
mhm.
But yeah, but NIS America for other Falcom games, East 8 and East 9 got PS5 ports. And then other NIS America games, I should say, like Caligula Effect, also got PlayStation 5 ports. So yeah, it's not super surprising that these games would follow suit.
Labyrinth of Galeria was originally on Vita and PS4 in Japan. The Switch version came out after the fact in Japan, but the PS5 and PC versions were also just ports that NIS America did. So
And
just
we've
the
talked
thing that I
before
ever
that
read
it's
about it.
we've talked before that it's helps to get it on retail shelves. Maybe just gives it a little just a boost of visibility when you can say, hey, your PlayStation 5, you can get a PlayStation 5 version of the game. I doubt it actually would have significant performance advantages really, but
It's
it's
just
there.
tidier for like your personal library of games
Right.
for some people. And then this last one was a game title that I hadn't heard in a long while. This is an indie project called Long Gone Days. It originally released on Steam Early Access in like 2018. It's a narrative RPG set in like a dystopian future. It will finally release out of early access and onto consoles, all consoles, Switch, Xbox, and PlayStation, on October 10th. I remember seeing the announcement trailer for the release, the art, and I'm like, haven't I seen this before? And I look on our website, and Zach actually covered this game back in 2018 when it was in early access, and the comments on his initial early access review are like, one of our readers said, "Hey, make sure you cover this again when it comes out of early access 5 years ago." And now it's like I didn't realize it hadn't come out of early access. I'm like, oh wow, like that's a long early access period for a game, but uh, coming out, and not only that, but coming out onto the consoles in a little over a month. So with that, we'll go into trailers. We'll just kind of roll through these here. I'm not sure how much we will glean from each of these. Fate Samurai Remnant, the two people on this podcast that could speak to this a little bit more directly than we could are not here. So maybe we'll just kind of glean this one through. Fate Samurai Remnant third trailer released, and this game is coming out in late September. It kind of shows a little bit more of the gameplay elements involving Gilgamesh and involving some of the stats for the character builds and things like that. I won't go into any of the detail here for fear of getting this wrong. Maybe we'll have to wrap back up into this next week, or just wait for the release of the game at the end of the month. But Fate Samurai Remnant, it's kind of funny because this is the game where was this the game, Adam, where the trailer like leaked and then we posted it and then it got taken down and then they formally announced it like a day later.
Yeah, like the
So
very first trailer, or not there was a
Mhm.
teaser trailer last year, but like the first full trailer, it was posted on the PlayStation YouTube account in like early June or something like that. And we just covered it like, oh, here's a trailer. And then they weirdly took it down. And it's like, okay, that was weird. We reposted it, got taken down, and then they just re-revealed the trailer like 2 weeks later or something like that. It was just kind of just some random occurrence that I guess it was posted early by PlayStation Japan.
Mm.
But yeah, this third
Yeah, but
trailer
this
seems to go a little bit more into like, if you're really interested in this game, it's less story focused. It's less like, it's not like a combat trailer either. It's more like, here's the shopkeeper, here are some of your skills, how you can basically set up your servant abilities and all of that. So kind of getting, maybe not too unsurprising, or maybe not too surprising for a third trailer, kind of getting a little bit more into like gameplay mechanics.
We also got a new trailer for Silent Hope. This is the what we kind of described as like almost like the 3DS era RPG that was announced at the Nintendo Direct earlier this year from Marvelous. So this trailer very similarly is kind of like a gameplay focused trailer, mainly talking about like the different characters slash classes. Like each of playable characters, like a dungeon RPG, is like named after their class. Talk about like Wanderer, Warrior, Archer, Rogue, how they all interface with the battle system of this game. So this is mostly a combat focused trailer for Silent Hope.
Yeah, this is kind of a weird game, interesting game, being that sort of chibi dungeon crawling-ish RPG in the Rune Factory story, which is sort of weird
Mhm.
because Rune Factory you don't really think of that. Rune Factory you think of, characters and farming and dating in action RPG. So
Oh yeah,
I don't know.
speaking of one of the classes, I rattled through a bunch of them, but one of the ones I didn't list was there's one of the battle classes is farmer.
Yep.
It's like wanderer, rogue, warrior, archer, farmer. So there you go. We have also another trailer for another kind of gameplay focused trailer on another October release, and that's for Sword Art Online: Last Recollection. Basically a trailer for playable characters, weapon types. So kind of very similar. I was actually talking to Adam right before this podcast, like September, and also I guess late August if you include like Baldur's Gate and Sea of Stars, is kind of like the higher profile releases. You could wrap in Armored Core as well. And then October has kind of like these other like kind of like the fringe releases. Not saying they're bad, they're just not quite in the limelight. Like you got the Sword Art, you got the Silent Hope, you got the I guess Fate Samurai Remnant is late September and not in October explicitly. So maybe I'm full of crap.
Well, October,
But
it seems like the biggest October release is probably Spider-Man, but that's not really in our wheelhouse.
yeah, so you have the Lords of the Fallen, you
Mhm.
have uh what else was in October? Dark Envoy, was that October?
Yeah.
So yeah. All like kind of like these other like not quite as marquee of titles, at least not in the RPG space. So but yeah, Sword Art Online Last Recollection, going into the playable characters and their voice actors in this one. We got the anime opening movie to probably the biggest November release for the site, and that's Star Ocean: The Second Story R. So this is very typical to get the PSP version had a unique opening movie. We got another unique opening movie um, for the new remaster. It features a song from the Japanese music duo Suiren. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. So I watched this trailer, and as I was watching it, Adam described to me like he didn't think that the animation was very good, and I was kind of thinking the same thing at the same time when I watched it. I mean, it's fine, but I guess when so many other games like have some really stylish, fancy, really high quality opening movies, this one just is kind of okay. It's just fine. But of course,
I
like
like
I've
the
kind of
color palette in some of the shots, like dark blues and purples.
yeah, the purple is really nice. But it's fine. I guess if you're familiar with the game and you're revisiting
It's
Star Ocean 2,
it's nice to see like,
you're
oh, I
gonna
know all these characters because that game has a lot of characters. If you're not familiar, Star Ocean 2, especially, 1 also, there's like, I don't know, it feels like 15 characters that can join you, but in a single playthrough only 7 of them can. So there's more characters than you can actually get because you have to basically make decisions on who actually joins. So there's a
which
lot.
used to be a key component of Star Ocean, and now it's kind of like
Well,
just like
6
this one
sort of had
character
it with
had the
like,
one.
yeah, the one
Yeah,
optional character that could be either or.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, like if you haven't played Star Ocean 2 and this is your first chance to get introduced to it, this just probably just I hope this isn't too like blasé of me or whatever, but it's kind of just comes across like an AMV. Like, oh, I don't have any context for anything I'm seeing here. But it looks fun enough. And it's just marketing for the game. So we'll revisit in November to see how we actually feel about the re-release. Here's another of those like November releases. This is Banishers: Ghosts of New Eden. This is a Dontnod developed joint who has always made a few interesting titles that are kind of in that fringe RPG-esque RPG adjacent space. So we got a new extended gameplay trailer. I thought these were story trailers mostly going into the podcast like over outline here, but a lot of these are really gameplay focused
Yeah,
trailers. So unless you're like
they call it a gameplay trailer, but it's really just like, here's 15 minutes of gameplay. And I'm sort of interested in this game, so I checked this out and it seems fine. It seems a little bit lower budget. Like, how do I put this? It's clearly not a AAA game. And you kind of have to set your expectations like that. Like, oh, okay, this is, from Nod. They made Life is Strange. It's from the Vampire team. Here's their next game. I will admit that the facial animations in this game are like honestly pretty poor, and it is a little bit jarring when you play games that have such great facial animations from bigger budget efforts, and it's like, oh, okay, this game doesn't have that quality, that tech, and you kind of just have to accept it. But it's just kind of like, man, I wish it looked better when people are talking. And I was actually looking at the comments of this trailer, and there's a lot of similar like sentiment where it's like, I'm interested in this game, it looks great, I like the style, but I wish the faces were better. And it's just kind of like, that's just kind of how it is. um
and it's
and
one of those things where it's like, does that really affect the quality of the game? Maybe not really,
not,
but it's
yeah,
also
like
that's a
that. It's the thing you see whenever a character is talking in an RPG, so it's kind of like you
that's very
can't
obvious.
ignore it. And it's just as tech gets better and better, it's going to become more and more jarring when you have the games that are like, when you have like an anime style game with the very simple like mouth movements or whatnot, it's not too bad, you know. But when it's like more and more photorealistic, the facial animation is more important. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's just like the one thing that's just kind of like a, almost like a black spot on this. Like, it looks interesting, I'm interested in it, but I wish that's just the one thing that stands out.
Mhm. Do they call this game an RPG? Because like it looks more like a third person like action game.
I
I
think
guess
so.
I
I'm pretty
guess
sure.
it says action RPG. I guess the official listing on Steam says action RPG. So we'll see. It's kind of a catch-all genre. It feels like these days. We have a new trailer. Here's a game that's coming out in less than a week. Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis got a countdown to launch trailer. Of course, we kind of covered this game extensively. Both Josh and James both had some time with the game. This trailer opens up with like a cinematic with the first soldier trio, whose name I'm already forgetting. It's like Glenn,
Glenn,
Lucia, and Mike or
the
something like that.
everyone's favorite Final Fantasy VII character, Glenn.
Yeah, and then of course, as they've been marketing this game, we still don't know Sephiroth, young Sephiroth. What's he doing? Who's he is? Then it goes into some of the actual gameplay where it's like, here are the events of Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy Crisis Core. Only everyone's wearing new neat outfits and stuff. This game, like I am on the record on this podcast saying like I was pretty damn excited for this game when it was announced. Just the concept of it seemed neat. I wanted to kind of catch up on all the other like Final Fantasy VII ancillary stories, compilation, whatever you want to call it. I will say the closer I get to release, the more I'm like,
Do you
am I
care?
really interested in this game? Like, I probably will play it, at least download it and put some time into it. But like as soon as I roll into like whatever the gotcha system looks like I probably will have like, all right, I can either continue to play this or I can go into Starfield or Star Ocean or Baldur's Gate or Guild Wars or there's like so many other things competing for my time. But I still think the combination of art styles is pretty neat. The 2D animation for like their portraits is pretty fun. Um, it would probably be cool to like to see kind of like how, are these events going to be important to fully understanding Rebirth early next year? Who knows? And then it also kind of ends as a Square Enix trailer typically does on a very mysterious ending where Sephiroth is like pleading with this other character who maybe my Final Fantasy VII Fu is lacking here, but I don't know who it's supposed to be. It's a character with like their hair tied back with like a Ronin style garb. Like I don't know who this is supposed to be
I
at the
don't
end of this
either.
trailer. So like very very Square Enix to be like leaving it
Is
teased
that
like
supposed to be
that.
like
So
Young
no,
Sung? I don't know.
yeah, I no idea. So I'm sure someone out there is like, no, obviously it's this. I don't like right now. My brain is not working. I don't know who this character is. Let's see. We have another story trailer. So actually, an actual story trailer for Cry Machina. This is the For You joint, released in Japan earlier this year. Kind of like the supposed follow up to Cry Star, but it seems like that's a very very thin connective tissue between Crystar and Cry Machina. Got a new story trailer for the game. Doesn't have English voice acting, so even the English trailer has subtitles, which is fine. But again, like unless you've been following this story very, very closely with the marketing, or if you followed the reception from the Japanese release a few months ago, it's a lot of scenes between a lot of characters that I just don't have any context for the story trailer. I will say I really like the art palette, everything. It's like they use like cell shading and bloom in kind of an interesting way with like the cyberpunk aesthetic. It kind of like I see this trailer and I'm like, yep, I know that's a Cry Machina trailer. It's very, very distinctive. But in terms of like what I'm gleaning from the little snippets of story that they're presenting, it's very, very little. But I think for most story trailers, it's kind of more trying to sell the vibe and
Right.
the kind of the like
That's the
rather
thing with story trailers sometimes is just sort of like disjointed random lines of dialogue with jargon. Like I don't really know what they're actually talking about, but it looks cool.
mhm. Yeah, so this is the other one of those like I was trying to make a thesis earlier in the podcast and failing about how like September has like these marquee titles and then October has kind of like these like everything else. And then Cry Machina is one of those. Like, oh yeah, this game it looks kind of interesting. It's in late October, so maybe my plate will be kind of clear by then to see what this game's all about. And then the last trailer that we
Uh,
got, this was for one of the I think it's the last one here, unless I accidentally
You
skipped
missed
one.
one.
Which one did I skip?
Little Goody
Oh,
Two
Little Goody
Shoes.
Two. All right, what is this one, Adam?
Little Goody Two Shoes is a Square Enix collective horror adventure game slash RPG. Whether or not how much of an RPG it is actually a little bit ambiguous because they called it one at one point and then they call it an adventure game at another point, so it's hard to tell. Uh, but this was revealed last year as a Square Enix collective kind of indie game from, I believe, a development studio in Portugal. And they have another game called, oh shoot, what was it? It's kind of like it's got this sort of like 90s anime aesthetic. Give me 1 second here. What was the other game called? It was like Pocket Mirror, something like that. Oh yeah, it is Pocket Mirror Golden Trom, and it's like I guess related to this. It's like this. It's got like a '90s anime aesthetic and also pixel art style. Horror adventure game. It's got like a fairy tale sort of aesthetic to it. Also, kind of Little Red Riding Hoodish. I mean, her name is literally Little Goody Two Shoes or whatever it is. Um, and it seems interesting. I know Chow is interested in this. He loves this, which is not surprising to me. He loves this sort of aesthetic and the older retro style. They released a new trailer. We have platforms for the game now. It's PlayStation 5, Xbox Series S and X, Switch, and PC, but still no date. But yeah, if you like that retro style 90s anime aesthetic, take a look.
Thank you for describing that game to me, Adam. I was distracted by the chat here where you posted the screen cap at the end of the Crisis Court or the Ever Crisis trailer, and you're like, "Who is this?" And someone answered, "New bullshit." I'm just like, I get where they're coming from. We'll see. Yeah. So the last trailer. Thank you for catching me up on Little Goody Two Shoes. It does kind of seem like a game that would be in Chow's window, kind of very East like, but the last trailer that we got here is a game that was teased and then announced to a little bit of a disappointing fanfare about a month ago, and that's the new Atelier game, which is a mainline game but only announced for Japan, free to play Atelier Reslariana. So we have a new trailer that introduces the game's second protagonist named Valeria. But then in addition, in the information for the game, kind of all the stuff that you'd expect to see from a game that people were kind of worried about is starting to creep through. Like for instance, there is a stamina system, but they say no, 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 it doesn't affect the main story. But that seems like a small concession. The fact that there's a stamina system at all is kind of a death knell to a lot of people's interest. Um, a game, of course, has a mechanic where you interface with other series heroes, including, of course, Ryza because she's super popular, but Eshi, Laja, Rorona, all of them. So uh, they haven't quite explicitly set.
You know, this
Go
reminds
ahead.
me of. It reminds me of
Hmm.
that like Tales of Chrysaria game, if I'm getting the name right, where it's sort of
Yeah.
like it was basically advertised as this is pretty much a mainline Tales game. It's got its own characters, it's got its own story. It's a mobile game, but it still has its own characters, its own story. But also you can play the gacha system to get the other characters, you know, the fan favorite. You know, I want to roll for my favorite character from a past game or whatever. And then Chrysaria died. So I'm just saying.
So, and yeah, there is still no formal Western announcement of this. It's coming out some point this year in Japan for PC and mobile, but no official date yet. I have no idea if anyone on site is interested in this game, but we'll keep reporting on it.
I know our
So,
Atelier fan base, as soon as this was announced as like being mobile, they just sort of, yeah, I mean, on
like,
our
oh,
staff, we're just like, oh, well, I can forget about this one.
yeah, I'll wait for the next one, or I'll go back to another one in the series
Tales of
that I missed.
Historia was all I was thinking of. I got the
Oh,
name
okay.
slightly
Well,
wrong.
there's been enough of those Tales games that I don't keep them straight.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're nearing the end of the podcast here. That's the end of all of the trailer rundown. So we have, of course, all of those on the site. So thank you. We've had a lot of people stepping in to do news over the last couple of weeks. We've had Josh and James and Adam and others as well. So thank you all for keeping up on all this. All because it never really slows down. Like we're past the summer. We're past the summer deluge, but we have PAX right now, TGS soon. Gamescom wasn't that
Oh
long ago.
God.
So
Oh fuck. Oh
Yeah,
God.
yeah, he's actually traveling. Like, oh, I got a
Yeah,
plane
yeah.
ticket and everything.
Yeah, it's and there was gonna be another person that I was doing it with. Yeah, he's actually done some freelance stuff for the site. His pen name's Double Soul. Just found out last night that he had car troubles, so he has to cancel doing TGS with me. So I'm flying solo
yeah, I believe
at
in you.
TGS.
Yeah.
God.
But we'll wrap up here with a couple just release dates, sales updates, the usual stuff at the end here. Here's one that's kind of good to see. 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim has now officially surpassed 1 million copies sold worldwide. So this originally released in 2019 in Japan, 2020 in the US. It got a Switch port just last year in April. And this game was, if you listen to our Game of the Year deliberations 2020, I believe, it was in the running at the very end. And it didn't win best story, but in hindsight, I played it after that podcast, and I think it should have. Basically, a game that we thought on the site in general very highly of. I know Josh especially. So the fact that this little Vanillaware title was able to uh, reach 1 million copies sold eventually is really good news. So really cool for that. Still hoping for a PC port eventually. I think that'd be really cool. But it is at least now available on Switch. The second of the Wo Long DLCs is releasing at the end of the month on September 27th. This is Wo Long, Conqueror of Jiangdong. So I did play the first DLC. It was exactly what you expect from a Team Ninja Souls-like DLC. I'm guessing this one will be the same. So I'm going to try to keep up to date on this because usually it's like spend an evening or two playing the new bosses, trying out the new weapon. I actually forget what the weapon type is for the second DLC is
I
going
don't
to
know if they've
be.
said
Did they
yet.
say? Oh, maybe
What
there
was the
isn't. I'm
first? Was
pretty
the
sure
first one the punch? The fist?
yeah,
It's almost
the
always the
Cestus.
fist. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know if they've said it. So I'm not gonna look it up now, but I'm excited for it. We got a release date finally for the Front Mission 2 remake. It'll be coming out on October 5th
For Switch. PC version
for
next year,
Switch.
probably.
Mhm. And then, unfortunately, one delay originally was slated for a generic 2023 release. The HD remaster of Suikoden 1 and 2 has been formally pushed back to 2024, which I think didn't really surprise anyone.
Well,
I saw some
we
people
were talking about
disappointed.
this last week, and we were basically saying, well, TGS is soon. Hey, you know what was announced at last TGS that we haven't heard from since? The Suikoden remaster.
This.
And we're like, well,
Mhm.
if we're going to hear about it again, it'd probably be at this TGS. And I guess I don't know if we'll see it at TGS or not. I mean, they might still show a new trailer or something, but we know it's not coming this year. So that was explicitly announced. So yeah, now we know. I mean, we still might get a trailer or something.
So 100 Heroes is also slated for next year, right? I'm trying to let's see. That'll be an interesting kind of pairing there. Yeah, currently on Steam, Aiden Chronicles 100 Heroes is Q2 2024. So of
Mhm.
course those two games are going to be compared naturally and deservedly so. And that covers us for all of the news. So, kind of no real theme, but thank you, Adam and James, for covering all of those over the last week. Thank you all in general again for covering while I wasn't here over the last couple of weeks. We'll go into September. Basically, have a lot of new games to talk about each week. Hopefully, we'll get Josh back next week and Chow. We'll see. I should be here. I assume Adam and James will be here as well. All of the articles that we talked about, as well as all the trailers that we could only describe and react to and not actually show, are all up on the site at rpgsite.net. You can find RPG Site on all the social media platforms. We're trying to be more active on Facebook recently, but we're still on the site formerly known as Twitter and Instagram, and on YouTube as well. You can join our Discord by hitting the link at the top of the homepage, or going to discord.gg/RPG Site. And we will be back next week with another episode of the Tetracast. If you enjoy this podcast, please give us a rating on your podcast service of choice. If you'd like to leave a comment, you can do that uh, on that site or on the podcast. We love reading those. Tell us what we're doing well. Tell us what we're doing poorly. We love seeing those any chance we get. But until you hear from us next time, stay safe and take care. And we'll talk to y'all later.
Bye, everyone.